My friends, Palestinian assault squads from Hamas launched an unprecedented attack from their besieged positions in Gaza, and they completely overwhelmed Israeli security forces, which literally went 404. Really, Israeli intelligence officers only learned of the attack on coffee break when they opened Twitter and realized hashtag Israel started trending. The situation is still very confusing, but currently the entire south of Israel is ablaze. And now there are increasing signs that Hezbollah is also preparing an offensive in the north of Israel. This offensive is beyond imagination. Palestinian assault squads carried out a combined arms guerrilla war attack. This is definitely not the same Hamas from a decade ago. We have speedboats, we have bulldozers, manpads, we have drone dropping grenades. We also witnessed the first Palestinian airborne combat assault with motorized paragliding units. So in this video we'll go through a step-by-step military tactical analysis of this Palestinian attack in order to understand and explain what happened. The first 2 days of battle have been brutal for Israel. 40 armored vehicles lost or captured, including 7 Merkava tanks. In terms of military personnel, 57 IDF soldiers and 34 police officers KIA. In only 2 days. Now, according to the latest news, the toll for the Israeli military has risen to 156. In comparison, when Israel was on the offensive during the month-and-a-half-long 2014 Gaza war, the Israel Defense Force had lost 67 soldiers KIA. Meanwhile, according to Israeli TV channels, the death toll from the Hamas attack had climbed to 900 Israelis, with at least 2,600 wounded. Israel is now officially at war. This has not happened since the 1973 Yom Kippur War, exactly 50 years ago. Coincidence? I don't think so, especially in a region where symbolism is so strong and important. Welcome to History Legends, and here are the latest news of the Israel-Palestine war. If you're new to this channel, make sure to like and subscribe. As you know, some of my videos have been targeted with limited or no ads. So make sure to check out my Patreon or PayPal to keep the show running. Thank you to everyone that has already helped, and welcome to the headquarters. Talking about Israel and Palestine is charged in history. But long story short, for those that are new to the party, it's a 70-year-old conflict that disproportionately impacted Palestinian civilian lives. Historically, Palestinian armed factions were always on the defensive against the IDF, like during the Battle of Jenin in 2002 or during the 2014 urban battle of Gaza. But this time, the balance of power is shifting. With the growing support of Iran and the military experience from the Lebanese faction Hezbollah, the Palestinian armed faction of Hamas decided to bring the battle deep into enemy territory, just like the Viet Cong did during their Tet offensive. This would allow Hamas to flip the script, bring the battle to an unprepared enemy, and aim for political victory. No. How did Hamas achieve all this military success? And how did they evade Israeli surveillance? Check out this article from the Times of Israel. Sources close to Hamas describes years-long campaign to fool Israel. What you have to know is that in previous military operations, senior Palestinian commanders in Gaza were usually removed within the first hours. But so far, this didn't happen. We can suppose that there is a big chance Israel lost most of its spies and informants within Gaza, and whoever remained most likely cut communications with their operators, thus leaving the IDF in the dark. This Palestinian operation, which I'll call Operation Shabbat, started on October 7th at sunrise, while Israelis were observing Shabbat. Within 20 minutes, Hamas fired 2,200 rockets into Israeli territory. The bulk of their Qassam rockets are locally produced. You have the 90mm, the 107 and 115mm models. And here you can see footage of the latest addition to their arsenal, the 114mm Rajum short-range missile system. We can also assume that a lot of decoys have been fired as well to create this mass effect on the Israeli Iron Dome, which got overwhelmed. The local population is used to the sirens and let's say it didn't raise any major alarm. That was until ground operations started. For this offensive, Hamas readied the stormtroopers from its well-developed military structure, the Al-Qassam brigades. Officially, these are between 15,000 and 40,000 fighters strong. But in reality, we're talking about a corps of about 2,000 elite combatants, organized into 6 brigades of roughly 350 fighters, which then can be reinforced with another 30,000 in emergency situations. It's also very important to note that a lot of these fighters from Al-Qassam brigades have been trained in Lebanon by Hezbollah, where they learned the ins and outs of modern warfare. We can assume that each of these Al-Qassam brigades was given one axis of attack. The main targets were Zikim and Erez to reach Ashkelon, Sderot to cover the right flank, Kfar Aza, Be'eri and Re'im in the center, plus Magan in the south. This is when the Palestinians were ready for the breakthrough. How about we just take a look at the cinematic videos that Hamas has released of their offensive. Keynote, they released them after the attack and not before, just saying. Before launching their units forward, Hamas claimed they managed a mass jamming of Israeli communications and surveillance systems along the border with the Gaza Strip. Apparently, this is what allowed their fighters to advance practically unnoticed in open ground. I mean, this certainly could have been possible with Iranian help, but I think there's a lot of propaganda in this and there might be more to the story. First of all, here's footage from a Palestinian drone, a freaking drone, as it's dropping grenades on Israeli guard towers along the border wall. We can clearly see that the objective is to disable the machine gun nest located there. Hamas also destroyed these guard towers using various types of rockets. We can believe they used the same tactics against communication towers. Once all these positions were destroyed, phase 2 could start. A tractor was sent forward to ram into the first fence, and they seemingly do this unopposed. The tractor is followed by 2 men from a demolition squad. One of them seems to be holding some sort of explosive tube. They blast another fence before letting a full unit of around 7 motorcycles through the breach. Now during the breach near the town of Zikim, on the way to Ashkelon, the footage is a bit clearer. There's a first fence which a small squad of engineers blow up. Then they advance towards the main wall. Right after reinforcements arrive, the first group lets in 7 motorcycles with 2 fighters on each, for a total of an extra 14 fighters. Every time it was the same structure. A demolition squad of around 5 men, which lets in a 7 motorcycle unit. Now let's take a look at the attack towards Be'eri on the central part of the front. The video starts with some guys approaching some sort of white pickup truck. But check out this demolition squad. The white pickups we just saw are actually on the other side of the fence, meaning the Hamas fighters somehow got behind the fence. Once the breach is created, 3 pickups filled with infantry rush inside Israel. So how exactly did these Palestinian fighters get behind the fence? Historically, Hamas used tunnels to infiltrate its fighters inside Israel. I'm not an expert in tunnels, but as you can see in these images, those seem to be relatively well built, as they're made of concrete. These tunnels would be hundreds of meters long, as they would start from somewhere in Gaza all the way deep into Israeli territory. But over time, Israel developed technology to detect those tunnels. I imagine especially if they're bigger. So we can believe the Palestinians reused tunnels, but smaller ones, only to allow a couple soldiers through. And instead of going deep into Israeli territory, these tunnels would be just long enough to reach behind the first barrier of fences and walls. However, at the same time, they could have used a simpler and more creative method, such as these now infamous motorized paraglider units. I'll let these images speak for themselves. But even the Palestinians managed to conduct combat airborne assaults behind enemy lines. These can easily fly at a speed of 24 kilometers per hour. So theoretically, they can cover 2 kilometers in only 5 minutes. So yeah, that's definitely another possibility. And such actions would be very possible, especially if landing small binom of two men at various parts of the fence. At the same time, we have to talk about the infiltration of Palestinian assault squads from the sea. We have footage of Hamas using its marines aboard speedboats to disembark troops deep into Israeli territory, right on the beaches of Ashkelon. They could have also dropped off some of them near Zikim, which is much closer to the border with Gaza. The motorcycle units were used as some sort of blitzkrieg. They were necessary to move fast, since the most important objective for Palestinian fighters was taking control of the Re'im military base, home of an important headquarters and communication center. Once they had breached the border, Al-Qassam units engaged the first Israeli forces. In this video, a 10-man strong squad equipped with an RPG destroyed this Israeli tank overlooking the fence. The Palestinians even fabricated their own guided anti-tank systems and fired at various Israeli vehicles guarding the border. And they also used the Air Force. This is where Hamas released an HD video of a drone dropping a grenade right on top of a Merkava tank overlooking the border. And they destroyed it. We can clearly see the Merkava burning and put out of action. With all the firefights, eventually some local Israeli units tried to intervene. Some tanks tried to rush in order to eliminate the breakthrough. Can you imagine that? Tanks of the IDF charging the enemy without proper infantry support or air support. These were quickly destroyed. Hamas also launched dozens of kamikaze drones, like these Al-Zawari models you can see on screen. But unlike in the trailer that Hamas released, it seems they actually launched them from inside buildings. This means all these positions easily evaded Israeli surveillance. Once Palestinian assault squads had overcome these obstacles, they simply drove on Israel's many roads using their motorcycles and even civilian cars like the pickups we just saw. As you can imagine, this made it very hard for Israeli security forces to detect between fleeing civilians and enemy combatants. Now be ready for the first major revelation. Take a look at these fighters on these motorcycles. Notice how they're wearing Israeli IDF uniforms with the infamous Mitznefet helmet cover. As an example, on the left, one Palestinian fighter in IDF uniform, and on the right, an actual Israeli infantryman. You can't see the difference. That's how they managed to infiltrate all these bases. The guards of these military checkpoints simply saw other Israeli soldiers approaching the base. We can even suspect that many of these Palestinian fighters in IDF uniform learned Hebrew with a perfect accent just to improve the level of deception. This is when the Palestinians reached the Israeli bases. This is where the attacking force brought in its reserves of foot soldiers. I consider those guys to be part of the third wave. They're calmly walking about a kilometer to the base in open field. In this video specifically, I counted at least 30 fighters, essentially a platoon. Then they spread out. This squad, composed of 6 men, runs deep into the base. Notice how one of them is equipped with an RPG. Generally speaking, it's always the same structure, 5 men with AK-47s, and one of them with an extra RPG. These assault squads were also supported by mortar crews and guided around enemy positions by drone operators. Here we can see 36 Israeli soldiers, most likely conscripts for the most part, pinned down and completely encircled by Palestinian strike groups. Very similar situation on the attack on the Re'im base, where a group of 14 fighters is calmly walking in open terrain. One of them is seen equipped with a special RPG, with a tandem charge warhead to penetrate hardened structures. Let's analyze the attack towards Be'eri. Once they had broken through the border, they had to reach 1 kilometer up to this military checkpoint, located right here on the map. According from the pictures from this neighboring World War I Anzac monument, see that the area is very forested, making it very easy for a big force of infantry to walk unnoticed up to the military base. Most of the defenders were surprised while still asleep. And let's just say that the images I've seen from the aftermath are disgusting. I'll leave it at that. Here's a very interesting footage of the storming of the Israeli checkpoint in Erez. We see how they blasted the wall surrounding the base. Then the commander of the unit tells his men to rush inside. In this frame, we notice 8 stormtroopers penetrating what seems to be a well-fortified compound. Sometimes the Palestinians did face stiff Israeli resistance, but it seems that whenever it happened, Hamas assault units simply called for air support. Broken arrow! In this one, a couple drones showed up and ambushed these groups of pinned down Israeli soldiers. Let's be honest, they probably didn't even know from what side it was coming. While some Palestinian assault forces were clearing up these checkpoints, others spread as far as possible across the countryside to delay Israeli reinforcements. For example, this unit fired a Cornet anti-tank missile at this advancing Israeli column. These same advanced parties also managed to shoot down 4 Israeli helicopters using manpads, most likely originating from Ukraine. To scare away other attack helicopters, Hamas also developed remotely controlled launchers for their Mubar-1 unguided rockets equipped with radio proximity fuses. And this could explain the lack of responsiveness of the IDF. 1, they had trouble locating enemy forces, and since they're used to fight with total air supremacy, the moment their aircraft were not present on the battlefield, it seems everything came to a standstill. Of course, one of the main political goals of this military offensive was the capture of hostages. We will remember how in 2006, one Israeli soldier was captured and later exchanged for 1,000 Palestinian POWs. And like that, we saw dozens upon dozens of Israeli civilians captured and brought back to the rear in Gaza. Obviously, many Israeli soldiers were also taken as captives, some of them dragged out of burning tanks. From all the footage I saw, I counted at least 20 Israeli soldiers as POWs, and let's just say with some more harmed than others. The Wall Street Journal reported that Hamas had captured at least 100 people, among them Major General Nimrod Aloni, perhaps the highest ranking Israeli officer ever captured by the Palestinians. To do so, hundreds of unarmed men from Gaza rushed through the breach. They acted like some sort of logistics fourth wave and picked up anything they could find in these bases. Hamas fighters captured dozens of vehicles of all types, many of them intact. Here you can see a bunch of them on top of intact Merkava tanks. As of now, according to Rybar, Israel lost 7 Merkava tanks, 2 destroyed, 3 damaged, and 2 captured. 2 Namr APCs captured as well, at least 10 Humvees, another 10 various APCs like the M113, and a minimum of 2 MRAPs, all taken back to Gaza as trophies. Then comes the part that shocked the entire world. We can only explain it as a deliberate attempt to force the IDF to respond as brutally as possible and unleash violence on the inhabitants of Gaza. This would essentially put the entire Arab world against Israel and would destroy all the latest attempts by Israel to normalize relationships with its neighbors. You can't forget that the governments in these Arab countries are led by their streets. If their streets demand action against Israel, these governments will have no other choice. Meanwhile, Israel is calling thousands of reservists. The IDF is not just preparing a counterattack, but a punitive expedition. But that will be for another video. That's all I have for you today. Let me know in the comment section what you thought of my analysis. If you're new to this channel, make sure to like and subscribe. And if you want to support my work, make sure to check out my Patreon or PayPal. The links are in the description below.